Welcome to Ideas at Work and Beyond. Today is December 7th, 2006. With us tonight, we have Matt Grimes, political analyst from Brookfield.
Thank you,
Mighty Heiser, chairman, Board of Finance from Richfield. Paul Trippi, political analyst from Bethel. And the best, Len Tabasak, Danbury Common Council member. Everyone, welcome.
Hello,
Thank you.
How should I address the public? Should I say...
Happy holidays.
Should I say...
Merry Christmas.
Should
it's
I
back
say...
in vogue.
It's your show, Ivan.
It's my show. Happy Hanukkah, whatever it is. If I miss anything, please...
Kwanzaa.
Solstice.
Happy Kwanzaa. How could I
Festivus.
miss that?
No, Merry Christmas is making a big comeback. Walmart's running with it. It's big.
Exactly.
Walmart's running with it. It's going to be running someplace else.
Okay, everyone. This is a roundtable discussion on local issues. As you can see, we have the surrounding towns here on the show tonight, and this is going to be a weekly thing now. So please call your friends, call your family, tell them this is going to be the best show in town. Just tune in. Okay, let's start with Danbury. The big news,
gorilla.
the big issue, the big gorilla is the sex offender ordinance that was just passed 18-1, and the person who actually voted against it is you. So I want you to talk about it a little bit, and what I would like to do is to get an input from everybody here to see how this ordinance is going to affect your town. Okay?
Well, Danbury passed this ordinance. It is going to require sex offenders to stay away from about 45 locations in Danbury. And that would include school playgrounds, public parks, any public recreation areas. And I think there are lots of problems with it, but for instance, if you're on the sex offender list in Brookfield, in Ridgefield, in Bethel, in any of these towns, and you want a tea time at Richter Park, too bad. You aren't going to be able to play golf. I want folks to imagine the Danbury Police Department, each officer having like this fold-out billfold, and it flops down so that he can look at 38 photos and see if he can identify anyone who shouldn't be in one of these child safety zones. The problem is, if you look at all of our surrounding towns, we have 72. There are some from Ridgefield, some from Brookfield, some from Bethel. And of course, these people can't come into our child safety zones either. So I see a real big problem with enforcement. But the sad thing is that there are probably 60 to 70,000 child sexual assaults every year, but they're not done by strangers in the park. They're done by family members, relatives, caretakers, coaches, priests, all kinds of people who are already connected with children, and we're ignoring that. And we're ignoring our recent history in Danbury, where we did lose a child, a 13-year-old, because of her contact with a predator on the internet. And he met her at the Danbury Fair Mall. This ordinance doesn't protect your child if you leave your child unattended for hours and hours at the mall. There are vast open areas there that we consider public spaces. They're not protected there.
Actually, there are more school kids hanging around
the mall.
at the mall, right, than Rogers Park.
And it doesn't protect kids from predators on the internet. So lots of kids aren't protected. We don't see kids in Danbury being abused or approached in our parks. So we've created this ordinance, I think, for council members to feel good, to give themselves a pat on the back, and to kind of walk across the stage of public opinion just before Christmas and say, this is what we've done for you.
See, Ivan, can I jump in here for a minute?
Yes,
I
go ahead.
I don't know.
Go ahead, Matt.
I don't know what's the motivation of the 18 council members that voted for this. I kind of hear what the one that voted against it is. But my opinion is that government, local, state, national, should be doing everything it can to curb crimes against the youth. We've got a big problem with that in this country, all over. It's not just a Connecticut problem, it's not a Danbury problem, it's a New York problem, it's a California problem, it's a Florida problem. We've got a problem with this all over the United States. With that in mind, We can't control what goes on the internet in people's homes. We can't control what goes on inside the churches and everything. I think that this is a move, regardless of whether it's 1%, whether it's 0.5%, whether it's 2%, to try and curb the crimes against the youth in public places. And I think that that's a good thing. And I actually hope the other towns pick up and follow suit on this, because I think that we should be doing everything we can. And granted, it's not many, but it sounds like it is going to curb something. But we should be doing everything we can. As a local government, I see Danbury as taking an important step in that direction.
Actually, it won't help, Matt, because statistics have found that what does help is the state's registry of sex offenders. When people have to give their address and say where they live, the recidivism goes way down. If you put all these bells and whistles on, you know, you're on the registry, you can't go to Richter Park, you can't go to the Danbury War Memorial, you can't become a member, you can't do this, you can't do that. Those very same sex offenders are not going to comply with the registration requirements. They're going to go underground. They're going to give a false address, or when they move, if they move Danbury and go to live in Brookfield, they aren't going to report. And then you'll have sex offenders in your community that you don't know about. They'll be hidden. So it doesn't help. It, in fact, makes the problem worse.
Well, that's an issue, but I don't think anybody would argue. I mean, there is the sex offender list, and obviously neighborhoods get informed about that. You can know, obviously, if your neighbor or somebody down the street. But the point is, the public parks and the public golf courses and any other public place where children are going to be are not the place for anybody that would harm the young. And I think that that's what this does. In a lot of ways.
If I understand, Lynn, I think I hear what you saying is this law doesn't go far enough, therefore I voted against it. What I would suggest is that we take this, and if there are still some holes and some gaps, those can be addressed. But what I find with all these sex offenders, you said, well, it's really relatives or priests or coaches or people that they've met. Who do you think are these registered sex offenders? Relatives, priests, coaches, and all that have been convicted of this crime, and that's who's on that list. So I'm absolutely in favor of this law. I can't imagine why you would vote against it, and I think it should be mimicked in the surrounding towns. What I relate well to, and I've seen it on TV. Thank heavens I haven't had a personal experience. It's the parents of a child who's been molested, who says, here we had a child molester in our neighborhood, and his rights trumped my child's rights, and I wasn't notified and wasn't able to take protective actions against it.
But you do know about the child molester in your neighborhood because the state requires them to register. This system that Danbury, this ordinance that we adopted, if an offender goes into a public park, he will get a warning by a Danbury police officer, and the police officer will severely shake his finger at the sex offender and say, you must leave this park. And that's what that ordinance does.
So the downside of that is what?
If they leave the park and come back to the same park, not to the other 44 locations, then they will get a violation. Right. And that violation includes a $100 mail-in fine. There's no go directly to jail. There's no take this person to court. There's no reporting. It's really an unworkable ordinance. It needs...
Lynn, let me ask you, because just out of curiosity, you would know far better than I. Earlier this year, I was lucky enough, and I went through the Danbury Citizens Police Academy. And through that, they tell you all about, you know, the department, everything they do. And it was brought up several times that the Danbury Police Department is grossly understaffed compared to similar cities throughout Connecticut, maybe even New England, however they judge that. Because of that, well, let me ask you, that is true, correct?
Oh, it's very true, yes.
In that regard, I completely agree with you. It's feel-good legislation. It is not enforceable. The Danbury Police Department logistically can't do it. They don't have the personnel to do it. It's not going to happen. What this was 18 council members who want to run for office and say, I'm against child molesters.
Everybody's against child molesters. Who is for child molesters?
Well, it's an election year, so probably you.
But you want an ordinance that really does what it says it does.
On the merits, we all want to protect children. Anyone who says
and I think that this does take a step in that direction. Argue any way you want to, but this ordinance definitely takes a step in this.
It's unenforceable. It's a waste of time.
Quick question.
Yeah.
How is this ordinance going to affect your town?
Well, the Danbury child molesters will be coming
They
back.
will. It's like, Matt, it's like a no smoking zone. There's no smoking in Danbury. Where are people going to go molest kids?
Actually, there is one cigar bar. There's a cigar bar in
If you're
Danbury.
going to molest children, right there, if you're a predator, your plan is to commit a crime. If you're going to molest a child, does it matter if you do it in a park? What is the additional
You
penalty?
cannot
What
legislate
is the
what's going on in
additional
private homes in this case. I mean, that's part of it. I mean,
It sounds to me as if these laws are similar to a drug-free zone around the high school.
they are.
Or the
And
underage drinking ordinance.
Okay, well, I think those are very effective laws where they know we're trying to keep drugs away. That's a problem we're having in Ridgefield. We're trying to keep drugs away from our kids. And if you heighten the penalty of having drugs in a drug-free school zone, then it's a deterrent. Same thing with these, the child molester, it's an insidious thing. When you talk about recidivism, these people have difficulty overcoming this, so it's a compulsion that absolutely needs to be controlled. And I see this law as going a long way towards doing that.
Let's talk about Richfield. We were talking about children. Richfield is probably the richest towns, right? It's a very rich town, right?
Yeah. It's
Okay,
fairly affluent.
in this area, right. But at the same time, I don't see what Richfield is doing to protect the children, especially with drugs. Now, my condolences go to the family of the gentleman, the high school guy who committed suicide.
Yeah.
But I understand that Richfield High School does not have a police officer there because they said that they didn't have the budget for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I sort of have a personal stake in this. I have a daughter who's a freshman at Ridgefield High School. I have a son who's a senior there. And we talk at the dinner table, and we talk about drugs and alcohol that are available in the school and what steps are being taken. And I think that the Board of Ed and the town as a whole could do a much better job of that. One of the ideas that I hope is going to be implemented soon is they have a drug dog, a dog that can roam the public places. We're not talking about, jacking up students in the hallway and searching, but they can go in public places. They can be in areas where the buses come and go, and they can register if they smell drugs, and it can be followed up upon. I think that's something that should be done. You talked about the officers in the school. There was officers in the school. The school budget has a budget of somewhere in the neighborhood of $62, $65 million. I think the school officer can be paid for through the Board of Ed budget and should have never been cut. I'm on the Board of Finance, so we have some input on the Board of Ed budget, and I know that their money is available and it shouldn't be cut. I think more, though, than just what government and what policing can be done, I think somehow the community as a whole needs to come together. The clergy, the houses of worship, some of the leaderships, even the civic leaders in town, and talk to the kids. Why is there this desire to escape, the desire for dependency on drugs and alcohol? What's motivating that? And get to the root cause of some of those problems. And I think it was a real wake-up call with this problem with a child who took his life recently. And I think the town is going to be responding.
But what is being done right now?
I think Marty brings up an excellent point, though, and I think a lot of towns have done some of the things Marty suggested. Brookfield put in the K-9 unit a year and a half ago. Police department put it out. We have a substance abuse coalition that's put together by the high school and by the community, and there's some members of the clergy involved. And I think the towns need to pick up the gauntlet on that. But, I mean, the most places starts as a home. Brookfield also has a Safe Homes program that we're not going to allow alcohol to be drunk on our premises and such like that if we're hosting teenage parties. And that goes a long way. It's done a lot to curb the underage drinking in Brookfield. It's done a lot to curb the illegal drugs. They are going to do, I believe, drug searches in the high school. And I think that the towns need to do that. And I'm surprised, actually, Ridgefield hasn't done that. And usually a lot of other school districts look to Ridgefield.
Do you think Ridgefield is in denial? Do you think Ridgefield is in denial when it comes up to drugs in the schools?
No, I don't think Ridgefield is in denial. I think there's some interesting constraints. I was actually just reading about this earlier today. For example, oftentimes if a child has been accused of having drugs, the parents will fight any suspension. The reason that they fight the suspension is because they don't want to have it go on the permanent record, because the permanent record can, in some cases, go to schools that they're applying to, and junior won't get into the school of his choice. So there's almost a opposite purposes between the school administration and some of the parents when these issues come up. I think that's counterproductive and very unfortunate. I think the town as a whole is concerned about this. The synergy between alcohol and also alcohol-related deaths from car accidents is almost worse than some of the problems we're having with drugs. That said, again, being a proud parent of a freshman, a young lady, my daughter, and my son who's a senior, not the entire school is riddled with drugs. It's there and it's available, but at the same time there are many positive outlets for the students, so I don't want to give the wrong impression. But it's certainly something that we can work on.
Okay, let's segue. Before we segue into Bethel, I want to let people know that we are live. The number is 792-4101, 792-4101. If you want to participate in the roundtable discussion, please do so. We're talking about schools here.
Or
and
if people have issues that they want us to address.
Exactly. And of course, we have Mrs. Tabasak here. So if you live in Danbury, you want to address an issue, please call, because we have the best here.
Can I ask Lynn one thing, actually? Now we're on the subject of what Marty was saying. Lynn, you were in the legislature in the mid-1980s when the drug problem among teenagers in this country was out of control.
And they did that silly law.
And what was the difference between, I guess, the drug problem in the 80s versus 2006?
Well, I don't know, but I think you know, Matt, that one of the laws that was passed was you can't sell drugs within 1,000 feet of a school. So you have every cop's got a tape measure on their hip so that they can measure off the distance. And people failed to realize that the people who were selling drugs in our schools were students, But these charges help police departments put enough charges on an incident so that they can plea down. You're charged with possession, intent to sell. You're charged with possession within 1,000 feet. I mean, it's part of kind of a game. It's sad.
Okay, let's segue into Bethel. They just voted on Tuesday to for this, right? For the school. What is
Bravo.
it? Let's talk about that, please.
They couldn't get it right the first time. They didn't get a shovel in the ground. They decided they needed more money.
Because to me, let me say this though. It's absolutely nonsensical to see that they, thank you, voters back Bethel project, $7 million to renovate the high school. But the $7 million going towards what, the new gym or something like that, right?
Well, it's a $32 million project.
Right.
For $32 million, we get a renovation of the current building and the addition of an enormous gym, moving the cafeteria. Now it's a large project.
Now, do you really think that $7 million towards a school that actually not advancing in sports? I mean, you look at Bethel, have they ever won anything?
Oh, sure.
And then you jump $7 million into anything?
Sure.
We want those calls from Bethel.
For $32 million, we're going to get a school. I voted no. I think it's more school than we need, and I think it maxes out our bonding capacity to an extent where we actually have to put other needs on the back burner. Beyond that, would a $33 million school give us a better football team? No. Money does not dictate the quality of education or the quality of a sports program. Qualified teachers do, proper curriculum, engaged parents, and a whole host of other things. I'm not an expert on schools. I'm not an estimator for a construction company. For $32 million, we're going to get a heck of a school. Is it more than we need? I think it is. But
is it going to raise the test scores?
Well, I don't know. It's my guess that it won't.
Well,
and we'll probably continue to lose whatever we lose in sports. But
no, it won't lose its accreditation. That's important for kids who want to get into some kind of college.
You know what? It is important. I'm not necessarily sure it should be, but it is important. But the reality is we could have gotten off probation for less than $32 million. And Bethel is not as wealthy as Brookfield. Well, it's not. It's not as wealthy as Ridgefield, certainly. We're a town of limited means, and $32 million is a significant amount of money.
Now, what lesson can you learn from Ridgefield? Because Ridgefield just built brand new school, right?
Yeah, we
lessons from us as well.
Now, what lesson can Bethel learn from Ridgefield? Because you have a
Could have learned
police
that we should have had
department.
zoning 30 years ago instead of 2 years ago.
Now, Bethel needs a new police department, and you're spending all that
So does
money
Ridgefield.
in the school. Now,
So
Ridgefield.
does Danbury.
And Danbury's getting one. Ridgefield, in my opinion, your police station's an embarrassment
Yeah,
for
yeah.
the size of the town and for what you actually can afford to build. That's being worked on, from what I understand.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
You know, I don't know. Years ago, they had thought about maybe building a police station down on the Apollody land where they put
Yeah,
the
exactly, yeah.
the rec
Talk
center,
about
maybe
that,
do a firehouse.
about
down
Well,
there.
this is sort of the from the view of the Board of Finance. You have to sort of get your head around what can we do and what is prudent to do. And the analogy that I like to make is a homeowner. Probably all of us here get these applications. You've been pre-approved for the premium platinum credit card here. You know, you're immediate, you know, $20,000 credit. And that's all well and good. Your credit is good and people are responding to that, and that's fine. But does that necessarily mean that you have to go and fill out the form and get that credit and then just spend it?
Some people
Same thing.
believe so.
Why not? Well, that's the same thing with the bonding ability of these various institutions. Yeah, you can go out to bond, and as long as you show that you're able to collect your taxes, you're a darn good credit risk, and people will throw money at you for whatever it is. In Ridgefield, we needed to do some sort of renovation to allow for the ever-increasing capacity of the students in the school. We put forward, it ended up in the final analysis about $150 million that we bonded, and it's taken, we're about 5 years into it, about 10 years of paying off that debt, and it's substantial. If you're running for office, you're in front of Stop and Shop and you're meeting people, some of the senior citizens, and they literally had tears in their eyes, and they say, you know, my taxes have doubled. I don't know if I can afford to stay here.
Okay, let's stop right here.
Okay.
Caller, you're in the air.
Hello. Are you talking about high school renovation?
Yes, sir.
Oh, isn't it just wonderful that they finally got another $7 million? I say that, unfortunately, you know, this is a plan that could have easily been put together and carried forward 3 years ago, 2 years ago. And it's sort of unfortunate that the original plan focused on fully renovating the existing school, and it evolved into a plan that focused primarily or 60% of it in an expansion and 40% of it in a renovation. So, you know, I'd like to ask the gentleman over there from Ridgefield, who seems to be pretty knowledgeable about things, and maybe some of the other people that sitting at the table, does it make sense that if you're going to borrow the money, does it make sense to compromise your objectives and not fully renovate the existing structure before you focus on the expansion? Because what we did obviously in Bethel is we sort of compromised the ed specs to the point where we don't have air conditioning in half the building, and we're not going to have it, and we're only partially renovating half the building, and we're obviously putting in a 30,000 square foot addition. So does it make sense that, you know, that we approve $32 million and still not fully renovate the high school?
Thank you.
Well, does it make sense? Actually, sometimes starting from zero, raw land, and building a new grade school in some aspects is less expensive than doing a renovation on 4 or 5 different existing schools. Anything, you know, if you deal in construction at all, renovation sometimes is more expensive than new. As far as ed specs and what people want and what the bells and whistles are, we went over and over and over these different plans. They were re-engineered, and we tried, at least in Ridgefield, to come up with the most economical approach to allow for the needs of the school. I'm not as well versed in their town, you know, what was done, did they spend enough, did they not spend enough, so I can't speak to that completely. The problem you have, too, and this brings another element into it, is the population of students. You know, are you building to a bubble, and once that bubble is over, you have all this excess capacity, and the worst thing you want as a municipality is to have a grade school that isn't filled, and you try to, you know, let's cut it up into offices and rent it out. And you can drive through these towns and you see that, and it's just a big waste of money for everyone.
Is that what happened in Ridgefield with the old Barlow Mountain School? Or
yeah, Barlow Mountain School, they changed it into a YMCA, but now they've recaptured it to use it as a grade school, as these, you know, populations sort of ebb and flow.
It was built, though, at the height of a or a peak?
Yeah, there was a peak, I think, in the 70s, and as people like John Fry, you're probably familiar with, will tell you, is that, you know, when they graduated and there was a real peak of students there, they actually used some of the schools from the Catholic school, and they managed, and so they didn't do a big building program. This time around, we did do a big building program, but it looks as if the student capacity, it's almost a build it and they will come mentality. So we have student education is a growth industry in Ridgefield, and it looks like it'll continue to be for a while.
And I think that both Reading and Bethel, there was an awful lot of blame game going on with their renovation projects, and it was partisan and nonpartisan and bipartisan, that everyone was blaming someone else for the difficulties. It was the building committee, it was the selectmen, it was the contractor. Yeah, and that can really stall things and make the project come to an absolute screeching halt.